Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, today we are going to be taking a look at U.S. presidents by military rank and combat experience. And I'll just talk a little bit more in depth about some of these presidents and their combat experience and what we know about those things. I'm not going to talk about every single one of them, but we'll try to hit some of the highlights as we go along. As always, I'll put a link in the description to the original content creator so you can check out that video without my commentary and see their other original content as well. Also want to let you know, since many of you have been asking when there's going to be a collaboration between me and Mr. Beat. Well, we talked about it today and we've got a plan in place, and there will be some more information coming. It's going to be several months away yet before we do this. Talking about maybe doing something around President's Day, something where we do a live stream together connected to ranking presidents. So more details will follow about that, and I'm sure that you can hear from him about some of those details as well. And maybe we'll do some other things between now and then, but I want to let you know that that's happening. He and I probably will see some of those things very differently, but that's what makes it fun. We both recognize that we have our own biases, but he's a super nice guy and very smart, knows what he's talking about. So I'm excited to be able to work with him, and hopefully it'll become a regular thing. We'll do some collaborations together. But for now, let's go ahead and dive into this one. U.S. presidents by military rank and combat experience. So it's showing us how this is going to work. They're going to just go in order of highest rank to lowest rank. So they're not going to be in order of when they were president. And you can see what army they served in and what combat experience they had. So George Washington is, technically speaking, considered to be a 6-star general in the history of the United States. General of the armies. Now, that rank has never really existed, practically speaking. It was something that was actually done in the 20th century where they voted posthumously to award him that rank. During his actual life, he would have been a lieutenant general, a 3-star rank. But technically, it's a 6-star rank, which is not a rank that's actually given out anymore. In fact, 5-star isn't even given out anymore. It has not existed, at least actively, since the middle of the 20th century. French and Indian War, he was a lieutenant colonel of Virginia militia, served as a kind of an advisor to General Edward Braddock in the early stages of the French and Indian War, and kind of took command of Braddock's expedition, even though he wasn't next in command when Braddock was mortally wounded, and kind of got the guys out of there. Obviously, we know his Revolutionary War experience, and then during the Whiskey Rebellion, which is something that happened in southwestern Pennsylvania as a result of taxes on whiskey. He actually led troops in the field, he and Alexander Hamilton, to go put down the Whiskey Rebellion. There wasn't any combat to speak of there. Dwight Eisenhower, we're all very familiar with him being Supreme Allied Commander in the European theater during World War II. Never actually had any direct combat experience. Never led troops in the field. Always had staff positions, but was very good at the politics of being in command of a multinational force. And probably one of the few people who could have pulled that off. All right, so let's talk about these ones here. Grant, we're, again, very familiar with him. They actually recreate the rank of lieutenant general, which hadn't been given to anybody since Washington. At least the full rank, the full 3-star rank. I believe Winfield Scott was a brevet lieutenant general. The brevet rank, which you'll see throughout this, I'm sure, in a time before there were medals that were given out, brevet was a way of giving special recognition to people. It was an honorary rank that did not come with the full rank, but so people like George Armstrong Custer, who for the rest of his life after the Civil War is known as General Custer and would wear a uniform that had 2 stars on it. He was never a major general, but he was a brevet major general, and so he was referred to that way, but he never had the full rank. But Grant eventually becomes a 4-star general when they create that rank after the war. And from that point on, there has been at least a 4-star general all along the way. And usually it was the general of the army was the 4-star general. Grant had Mexican War experience. I think he was in the 4th U.S. Infantry during the Mexican War, served as a quartermaster, but also was very heroic during that war. Andrew Jackson, very famously in the Seminole War and then in the War of 1812, he leads the American troops at the Battle of New Orleans, which is a great victory for America, which happens after the war was technically over, but nobody knew that yet. The Treaty of Ghent had just been signed, ending the War of 1812, but word hadn't come back to North America yet. William Henry Harrison, known as Tippecanoe, and Tyler, too, was his famous running speech when he ran for president, won the Battle of Tippecanoe against Native Americans in the Northwest Indian War, fought in the War of 1812 as well. All right, so Zachary Taylor, he and Winfield Scott were like the 2 main Army commanders during the Mexican-American War. And Zachary Taylor was elected president on the backs of that. James Knox Polk was president during the Mexican War, but had promised when he ran to only serve for 1 term. He had a bunch of goals he wanted to achieve. He achieved those goals, did not run for re-election. Zachary Taylor then becomes president on his success from the Mexican War. You can see his experience there as well. He's a major general, dies very soon into his term. His son-in-law for a brief time was Jefferson Davis, who had married Zachary Taylor's daughter, but she passed away. Jefferson Davis remarried. So this is kind of interesting here that they have Rutherford B. Hayes ahead of James Garfield. James Garfield was a full major general of volunteers. Now, there's a difference between a volunteer rank and a regular army rank. And this happens multiple times in history, most notably during the American Civil War and then the First and Second World Wars. Because when you rapidly expand the size of the army, you have a sudden need for high-ranking officers. And so going into the Civil War, men who were captains and even lieutenants in the pre-war army find themselves generals during the Civil War. But then when you get to the post-war and you don't have a 2 million man army anymore, you don't need 300 generals. You need a dozen or 2 generals. And so everybody gets reverted to pre-war rank or to their regular army rank, whatever that might be. So Major General Volunteers, if he had stayed in the army, which he might not have because he was a political general, Garfield was, so was Hayes. Neither one of these guys went to West Point or anything. But Brevet Major General Volunteers is a lower rank than Major General Volunteers, and both of them would have been a lower rank than, say, a Brigadier General in the regular army. So it's kind of tricky to put them in order, but we're not going to get too caught up in the order of things. We'll just talk about them as they go. Rutherford B. Hayes was at one time the colonel of the 23rd Ohio, which also contained William McKinley, who had enlisted as a private and eventually becomes a brevet major. So there were two future presidents in the same regiment, the 23rd Ohio, both from Ohio. James Garfield as well, as was William Howard Taft. Now, Taft had no combat experience. His Major General's commission was actually in the American Red Cross, which is kind of interesting, under jurisdiction of the War Department. So it wasn't necessarily, he wasn't really in the Army. And I think the same goes for Grover Cleveland, had a similar kind of position. Franklin Pierce now was a brigadier general in the regular Army, Mexican-American War experience, gets elected president a few years after the war. Very sad story, but we won't get into that because we're talking about military experience. All right, so there's Tommy Lee Jones, a.k.a. Andrew Johnson. Doesn't he look like Tommy Lee Jones there? Chester Arthur didn't have combat experience. He had service experience. He's Inspector General of the New York Militia during the Civil War. Does not serve in the field at all. So no combat experience there. Andrew Johnson was a brigadier general in the U.S. Army, also military governor of Tennessee. He was the only Southern senator who stayed loyal to the Union, and so was rewarded for those things. Benjamin Harrison, interesting. Look how young he looks there compared to when he was president, and he had gray, kind of white hair. But again, an Ohio president, brigadier general. Well, he's born in Ohio, but he serves from Indiana. So yeah, Indiana State Militia, combat experience in the Civil War. So Thomas Jefferson's another one. He's a colonel because he's in charge of the Virginia State Militia, but he never really serves in the field at all. And very few people even really remember him for that service. James Madison, same thing. Not really any combat experience. James Monroe, on the other hand, definitely a war hero. When we're talking about people with combat experience, when you look at that famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware before they attacked Trenton, Lieutenant James Monroe is in the boat with him there. Now, whether that was really true or not, I don't know, but he was at the Battle of Trenton. He was wounded at the Battle of Trenton. But definitely everyone speaks of him as a very heroic officer during the American Revolution, part of the Continental Army out of Virginia. Definitely served honorably. Polk, Colonel, Tennessee Militia, no combat experience. Now, here are two presidents who absolutely have combat experience. Theodore Roosevelt is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy when he leaves that role to enlist and to raise a regiment of soldiers called the Rough Riders. And he becomes colonel of that unit, leads them in a famous charge up San Juan Hill. Incredibly brave guy. I mean, this is a bad, American. Tough dude. I could say a lot about him, and we'll probably do more at some point. There's a movie coming out about him, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Theodore Roosevelt. Gets elected vice president a couple of years after the war, then becomes president when McKinley's assassinated. Posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. You can actually see the video from that when he was awarded the Medal of Honor. I think it was Bill Clinton who awarded the Medal of Honor to Theodore Roosevelt, along with his son, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who received his first, actually, received a Medal of Honor for his actions on D-Day, landing on the beaches of Normandy. One of only two father-son combinations to receive the Medal of Honor, the other one being Arthur MacArthur and his son Douglas MacArthur. Arthur MacArthur got his as like a 20-year-old colonel leading a Wisconsin regiment during the battles around Chattanooga. And then his son, Douglas MacArthur, for action during World War II. Harry Truman is in command of an artillery battery during World War I. Definitely serves in combat, served very well in combat. Again, not a career soldier, not a West Point guy, but serves admirably during the First World War. Now, this is an interesting one. Lyndon Johnson, U.S. Navy Reserve, receives a Silver Star. To my knowledge, did not serve in combat. And I'm trying to remember the circumstances. I might go ahead and look this up because the circumstances under which he received his Silver Star, I seem to remember being kind of dubious at best. So here we go. How a luckily timed bathroom break. Boy, if anything just screams Lyndon Johnson, it's a bathroom break saving his life, because Johnson was known to, he'd be sitting on the toilet and he would be having meetings with advisors and things like that. And, just was kind of known for that sort of thing. If it not for the Naval Reserve officer Lyndon Johnson's sudden need to relieve himself before a bomber flight during World War II, he might never have taken over the Oval Office. His bladder caused him to lose his observer's seat on the Wabash Cannonball, a B-26, that was shot down by the Japanese in New Guinea, and he avoided dying with the rest of the crew. And so General Douglas MacArthur controversially awarded Johnson a Silver Star for his experience during the war, but he did not serve in combat. So there he is in the Navy. It's interesting how many of our presidents kind of in a row were Navy officers, but here it is. So his Silver Star citation noted that he evidenced marked coolness in spite of the hazards involved and concluded his gallant action enabled him to obtain and return with valuable information. So he was on a plane. As they approached the Japanese base, they found scores of Japanese Zeros attacking the previous wave of planes. The Wabash cannonball was hit and caught fire, killing everyone on board. An electrical engineer for one of the heckling Hares, 2 engines failed, forcing Greer to jettison his load of bombs. Johnson gamely went back into the plane to offer to assist the gunner, but mostly watched the terrifying event through the plexiglass nose. So basically, he was an observer on this plane, and because he was an observer and didn't lose his cool, MacArthur gave him a Silver Star, but he didn't really do anything. Okay, Richard Nixon, also a commander in the United States Navy, experienced during World War II. I'm not entirely sure of his combat experience, if any, that he had. Millard Fillmore, another one, a major U.S. militia, New York militia, didn't have any experience. William McKinley definitely did have combat experience with the 23rd Ohio, eventually becomes a brevet major. He was at the Battle of Antietam. I believe he was like a commissary sergeant at Antietam. There's a big monument to William McKinley on top of the hill that overlooks Burnside Bridge on the south end of the battlefield from his service at the Battle of Antietam. Gerald Ford, a lieutenant commander during World War II. So you can see what I mean about how many of these presidents kind of in the post-World War II era have Navy experience. John Tyler is in the War of 1812, Virginia State Militia. I'm not real familiar with his service. Abraham Lincoln was a captain in the Illinois State Militia in Black Hawk War. I think he might have seen some skirmishing, but not really any real major combat against the Native Americans during that war. So Ronald Reagan's in the U.S. Army Air Corps. This is before the Air Force had a separate command. He did not see any combat experience during World War II. He was actually used. In fact, you'll see a lot of the films that are made, the highlight reels, the news reels that are done that people would watch, that would play before movies in the theaters. This is a time before television was in people's homes, and so this is how they got their news, how they saw things. You'll see a lot of those are narrated by Ronald Reagan. He was used for his Hollywood experience as an actor. Now, John F. Kennedy, legit war hero, commanded the PT-109, which was a small kind of torpedo boat. In the middle of the night, got rammed by a Japanese destroyer and split in half. And he was injured pretty badly, had back problems the rest of his life, but dragged some guys to safety, swam to shore, and was badly injured, but a legit war hero. His brother died in World War II. His older brother, Joe Kennedy Jr., was shot. I think he was shot down in a plane, or might have been friendly fire, or I don't remember the circumstances, but he was lost, I think, over the English Channel. And Jimmy Carter, he's a lieutenant. I believe he served on a nuclear submarine. Only one of our presidents to have been an officer on a submarine. So that's a pretty cool experience. You've heard me say this before. Not rated real high as a president, but as a human being, first class. I mean, Jimmy Carter is one of my favorite humans who have ever existed. He is just a really, really good guy. He's in his 90s now, has dealt with brain cancer, and still teaches Sunday school, goes out and helps build homes for Habitat for Humanity. He and Grant, to me, among the presidents, are some of the most first-class human beings that have ever been president of the United States. So here's another legit war hero. George H.W. Bush was the youngest Navy pilot in the Pacific during World War II. And he was actually shot down at one point and was rescued by a submarine. There's actually a video clip of them pulling him out of the water. and onto that submarine when he was rescued. So George W. Bush, no combat experience, was a Air Force, Air National Guard pilot. Pilot like his father, didn't serve during the war, Vietnam War. And that's all of them. The others have no military service to speak of. The vast majority of our presidents did have military experience, but seems like it's less and less of a thing now. If you look at the last several presidents, Biden, Trump, Obama, that's 3 presidents in a row that did not have combat experience. I'm not entirely sure we've ever gone this long without a president, without a military experience of some kind. And Clinton didn't either, and George W. Bush did have Air National Guard experience, but he's the only one of our presidents going back to his father in 1993. Who had any military experience at all. So pretty interesting stuff. If you have something to add to that, use the comment section below. I'd love to have that conversation. I know that the presidents are a very popular topic on this channel. So like I said, check out the original content. The link's in the description. Thanks for watching.